Hey everyone, Nick Engvall here. Before we get into today's episode, I want to tell you about some of the people that make the sneaker history community and this podcast possible. It's more important than ever to think about who you give your money to when you're buying clothing to go with your kicks. Our friends at Guilty Goods started their brand with a goal of giving back, especially to the communities that make sneaker culture possible. With every purchase from Guilty Goods, at least 10% of the proceeds are donated to organizations like Big Brothers and Big Sisters, the Susan G. Komen Foundation, the Movement for Black Lives, and many more. You can save 30% on your order by using the code HISTORY at guiltygoods.us. Again, that's history at guiltygoods.us for 30% off, and you can feel good about your purchase knowing you're supporting a meaningful cause. Sneakers are all about presentation, and if you're like me, displaying your kicks at home or in the office is just as important as when they're on your feet. Sneaker Throne makes sneaker display cases featuring customizable LED lights, drop-side cases to showcase the entire side of the shoe, not just the heel or the toe, the whole shoe. They've also got display cases for trading card collectors and hat collectors. To me, it's the perfect way to display your collection. You can save at least 10% on your Sneaker Throne order by using the code HISTORY at sneakerthrone.com. That's history at sneakerthrone.com. If you're a Patreon supporter or a member of our Discord community, you already know about Kicks with V hot sauce and his small batch, locally sourced hot sauce. V has been one of the biggest supporters of sneaker history and the podcast since the early days. He's currently the defending champion in our community trivia nights competition. Kicks with V hot sauce has been a huge hit with the community. You can save 10% on your order by using the code SneakerHistory10 at kickswithvhots.com. That's SneakerHistory10 at kickswithvhots.com. Now, you're probably here because you like sneakers, and if you join the Discord, you know our community is about so much more than that. Whether it's the marathon-like community calls, trivia night debates, the in-person meetups, or just sharing our favorite experiences, we found that although we have such different backgrounds, we all have some unexpected shared passions. Not only does the entire community look out for each other when it comes to releases, we're like a support group for life in general. You can join the Discord community for free by heading to the show notes of this episode. After you're done listening to this episode, tell someone you like their kicks today. You never know how far a simple compliment can take you, and we all know how good it feels to have someone show their appreciation. Now let's get into today's episode.
Jordan trying to shake off Starks. Oh, what a LeBron James with no regard for human life. Final seconds. Bryant for the win. Iverson against Gill. The crowd on its feet. Allen for the win.
Welcome to the Sneaker History Podcast.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Sneaker History Podcast. My name is Nick Engvall, and today I have one of my I would say one of the people I look up to the most in the sneaker game over the years, and somebody who really kind of drastically changed the direction of my career just based on some of the things he created. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Paul Litchfield, who many of you might know. But Paul, how's it going? Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Nick. Things are going great. Really appreciate you having us today. Thank you.
Of course, man. Of course. So we had connected a few times throughout my journey, and you had kind of been one of the pioneers in the footwear industry. Prior to that, I guess maybe give a little bit of background of how of what you've done, what you've accomplished, and how you kind of got started in the footwear industry.
Well, I've been in the business for a long time, since 85. And before that, did some research. So prior to being in the footwear business, I was in graduate school program in exercise science and muscle biochemistry. Basically, how does the body perform and how does it work? And did a bunch of research in the United States at university, but then also over to Scotland working on my postmasters and on a PhD work, and had a little brief stint doing some work with Nike back in the day on research for their Columbia running shoe, which was their first full-length air sole running shoe. They wanted to look at muscle damage, over long-term, long distances and ultra distances. So we did some research back then and packaged that up, sent it to Nike, and then went back to working in university work. Came back to the United States to finish my PhD, ran into some complications and found myself at a couple of crossroads to either dive back into academics and finish my work and become, a wicked smart professor, or I had this chance to I interviewed with and then had this got offered a job with a small company called Reebok in the Boston area, and this was in November of '85. So in December of '85, I took a job with Reebok. doing research and development. It was a very loose title, but I was working on product with 2 other developers and 3 designers, and that was the entire R&D department. And then I was going to do that for 6 months and then go back to school the following fall, right? Finish up. And that 6 months turned into 37 years. So,
hey, I can totally understand that. It started as a hobby for me and was one of those things that was unattainable as a kid because, the shoes were just too expensive for the family. And next thing you know, you find yourself, a door opens and then more doors open. And then, yeah, I'm getting close to 20 years now myself. So.
Yeah, no, Nick, it's funny because I met you when you were first kind of getting into the sneaker game, even though you'd already done a lot of writing and stuff like that, right?
Yep.
And you had a lot of street cred going, but much like I don't know, to me, I find a lot of us end up having this these unintended pathways that get us to the sporting or footwear destination, right? Interest in all that certainly is a momentum builder, but you need to probably change course on what you're doing, right? And then when you get in here, if you've got a genetic flaw, then this stuff really works for you, right? If something is missing in your brain, you go like, "This is really fun," it becomes part of you, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, so before we get into the rest of your journey and where you're at now, we've got a lot of listeners that are, I would say, maybe potentially aspiring footwear industry professionals. So. Could you talk about maybe especially in those early days with such a small team and some of the just grandiose ideas that came out of that era? Like what were some of the roadblocks that you had to move and hurdle over to get through to where you ended up? Because, nowadays, like it's so different. People can kind of find the answers on a YouTube video or find the answers in from a connection on social media or something. But I feel like, what we were talking about before we hit record, that drive / stubbornness that I think you and I share is part of what makes us really successful and also just makes us really appreciate this industry. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So kind of a lot to unbundle. I'll try to do it quickly. I think that I think you need to have kind of a thick skin because this whole process in the business is actually pretty humbling. I mean, I know that like today's part of my 15 minutes of fame, right? Because I'm talking to, the world via your podcast, but most of it is just the daily grind and the projects, whether they be making the shoes, promoting them, writing about them, describing themselves. It tends to be a pretty humbling process because the product is going to dictate the direction, right? And invariably with in our business, there are many things that are subjective. Like with us on this podcast, there's a shoe that I might love, and it might fit me well, it might be great, and all this kind of stuff. And then you just might hate it. Now, it might fit you equally well, but it just doesn't work for you. And now, how can I rationally kind of wrap my head around that if I was party to creating that shoe? Yeah. Right? Just things like that, or when you're doing a blog post or when you're doing any of these podcasts and somebody writes in, I think you've said in some of your past interviews, you get these trolls out there who just kind of throw hand grenades and you're like, oh, okay, like, all right, I guess, but you got to be willing to kind of let that just wash off you and move forward. So that's kind of, to me, it's a degree of perseverance and it's a degree of humility and it's a degree of just not listening to the noise.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. Did you, when you specifically around like the pump and the technology and that kind of conversation that was happening back then, when you kind of, you and the team figured out that it worked and it functioned and it could work, was there like a wow factor there, or was it more of this might this might work kind of thing. Because I think that's a part of what our listeners are probably, we've all got those voices in our head of like, this isn't going to work. There's plenty of that confirmation, but
okay. So we used to call it, you have your wall of fame, right? Which is you put your shoes on. Behind it is a warehouse full of Hall of Shame, right? And no, seriously, right? And that's the part I like. I try to spend a lot of time in the Hall of Shame because what it does, it's very informative, very educational, but it also keeps you grounded. Like when you said the stuff we did back in the early days. First of all, Footwear was the mobile phone, the cool car, all the cool stuff that you guys have for distractions now, right? Yeah. Video games and stuff like that. I mean, we had asteroids, and that was it. So sneakers and footwear was kind of the deal. That was the moniker, right? So, and the sporting goods industry was changing a great deal back in the late 80s. And the running boom was well underway, but it was going from those Frank Shorter, like really short shorts, tank tops, to people who would just run all the time. So and the basketball game was going from the old school kind of set shot, kind of like to a very dynamic Julius Erving, Dr. J above the rim kind of thing, and all that. So everything was changing, and at the same time, one of the things that was going on, Nick, was that there was a bit of a proliferation of new materials. The DuPonts, the Dows, all the chemical companies, BASF, all these guys, they were looking at how to improve their own material portfolios, and many of those materials rather, actually ended up being useful in some way, shape, or form into the footwear business. So that helped a lot. And when we were looking at the combination of these material sciences, the performance biomechanics, and also the enthusiasm just in the industry at the time, right? It was easier to just I think it was easier to make stuff. I think it was easier to do it because we were kind of setting our own rules. Now, that it also resulted in spectacular failures, but that's all part of it, right? And so and so when we were doing the pump, there were a couple of kind of eureka moments for myself and the small team that we had. It was myself and one or two people at Reebok. We also worked with a company, outside consulting firm called Design Continuum, and we were able to put together these shoes, and every person contributed to the creation of it in such a way where it was but when it converged, it went spectacular. Now, is this an audio only or visual also?
I'll have both, but I usually only publish audio.
All right, dude, check this out 1 second, because I did this the other day. Just hold on 1 second.
Yeah, seriously.
This is my barn. So, dude, here is the very first pump shoes we ever made.
Wow.
Okay? Yeah. So, dude. Of course, the PU's all flaking off, right, Nick? But this was where the pump was back here. Okay.
Wow.
And then we had another one which I thought was way cooler. This one here had a little like a dimmer switch. It has. Sorry, let me do this here. It has a round valve in it, and down inside here, there was a little heel pump. Can you see it in there?
Wow.
Okay. So Nick, what happened was. We went to a couple of high schools and college, local colleges, JUCOs, right? To try these out. And I was convinced, and again, this was another point of learning for me. I was convinced that this was going to be it, because you could walk on it and it inflated, right? But it inflated over steps and stuff like that. But I thought it was very cool. Now, what happened was, and this was not by our instructions, but kids on the bench during, they're playing practice scrimmages. When they're on the bench, they'd be bending over, sitting down, pumping up their heels, and then on the side here is a little bicycle tire relief valve, right? And so that ended up that ended up creating this little psh, psh of air. And kids were getting jacked about that. But it was one of these things where it was like, holy shit. I'm like, it was just one of those, that was one of those epiphanies for me where, I was, because of all my degrees and shit, I'm like, this is the way to go, right? And people are like, no, kid, no, this is the way to go. So to me, Nick, it was just very, very cool. It was very cool. So then let me do one thing, 1 second, all right? Sorry, dude. So this is that shoe again, right? And because the PU fell apart, I want to show you this. You see these dangling little things here? We actually literally had to make the shoe, stick your hand in, make these fitment connections and all that. So it was impossible to make this shoe. I mean, we can make samples. And we brought these down, finished these up literally, dude, on February 4th, 1989, okay? And I hand carried them back down to the Atlanta Super Show. And we brought them in, and then all the cool kids at Reebok, they took these, and we had them behind this special room you had to be invited into. And these things worked. And people were like, because at the same time, Nike had their Nike Air Pressure. And I got one of those over here as well. But they had this Nike Air Pressure. It was under glass, and you couldn't see. And it was like typical Nike, like super buffed out. But it was way more finished than our shoes. So our shoes created a buzz because we wanted to try them on. People could feel it and shit like that. And then we went back, and I had to inform Paul Fireman, the owner of Reebok, and other people that, hey, we can't make these. And Paul was pretty clear about the fact that, if I intended to remain employed, we were going to figure out to make it. So I talked to our VP of design, Paul Brown, British guy, and Paul did all the freestyle. He did a lot of the early aerobic stuff, exo fits, and all that kind of stuff. And I said, Paul, we got to make this shoe, but we can't have the pump here on the heel counter. We got to put it somewhere in the front of the shoe, and maybe, I don't know, put it down here. I was just throwing shit against the wall. Put it up on the collar, wherever. So Paul came up, and within about a 4 or 5 day period, Nick, he had this drawing that looked like this. And he actually literally placed it right like this. And I'm like, that's cool. He says, yeah. He said, I was thinking, we needed the pump somewhere. He said, I put it on the top of the tongue. And he said, I made it look like a basketball. And dude, Nick, honestly, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but when I'm like, shit, that's it. And so the whole trajectory of the project changed. The whole Forrest Gump thing, dude. Yeah. The whole trajectory changed, and this was now probably early March, right? And we had to have this thing out the door by holiday, by November. Black Friday of '89. Dude, it was like I coined this phrase. I was like a leper colony because nobody wanted anything to do with it because this is going to fail miserably, right? And so nobody wanted to be associated with this because there was a lot of momentum on the Reebok side for it internally, and ultimately we were able to figure things out and put it all together and all that. But I mean, long story short, always the product informs you on where you're going, right? The notion that, this pump shoe, this was the idea from the beginning. Yes and no. We wanted to make a better supportive basketball shoe for bigger players, faster players. We wanted to make a shoe that had certain attributes. We settled on this customization. We're using Air as a management tool. And then basically what we did was we put it together. In July, late July, okay, dude, check this out. Hold on. We're going right. You ready? So, all right, sorry. I was going to do my iPad, but I didn't. So these are, let me see. These are the very first pump molds. Here, okay. I don't know if you can see it. This is the very first mold. Wow. It's a brass tool. Yeah. Can you see it? So this is a brass tool. It weighs, it's a solid piece of brass. And here are you basically, here's the pump bladder that it makes. And this was my first ones we made back in '89, right? Anyways, these brass tools, we had to sign a contract with this company, Dielectrics, who was making this with us, and we had to sign a contract for 36,000 pair in July. And my VP, my buddy who's a VP of production, Chris Walsh, Chris had said, look, you're signing this with me because, when this thing flames out, you're going down with me. I'm like, all right, cool. So, but what happened was, because Reebok was we were the biggest shoe company in the world then, we were really, despite of ourselves, we were very popular. And what happened, Nick, was our VP of sales, Bob Mears, had a great relationship with Foot Locker. And so he cut a deal with them, and I don't even want to know the details, but he cut a deal with them where they would take a container worth of these pump shoes. And they did so somewhat, I think, begrudgingly, but it at least got us a container, like about 4,800 pairs of shoes or something to be made. So our first production was started on September 21st of that year, and because I was out in Korea working on that, and we had 7,200 pair in our production run. That was it. And that was in September of '89. And then Fireman held this shoe up at the Chicago ISPO show. And he basically said, this is going to be the Reebok freestyle of the 90s, meaning this was going to set the new agenda for Reebok. And dude, from there, honestly, Nick, this is where, to me, it was super cool, because the Reebok machine, the marketing, the advertising, the athlete PR team, dude, they went into hyperdrive, and it worked unbelievably well. And the shoe became this momentum unto itself, right? And then we started selling it. Dude, we sold it by the bucket. And you want to talk about being a frugal kid, or being a kid with a frugal family, right? I'm from Boston. We working family and all that. And this shoe was $170 to start. In 1989, I'm like, I couldn't afford that shit. But people did, man, and it worked out really well. And again, it was part of, like we said, the hard work, good luck, and opportunity converged, and it became this thing. And that's about as Forrest Gump as you can get.
Yep, absolutely. Well,
So I know that went a little bit deeper, but I just wanted to show you that stuff.
Everybody's going to love that story and seeing that. But it leads me into kind of questions about like how all that came together and kind of the contrast between then and now, right? You mentioned first, just like, it's interesting to think about the different groups of people, the people outside of Reebok. There's different people that are all connected to these products and the story behind all of these.
Yeah.
And I think it gets lost in translation for people that don't work in the footwear business or the apparel industry of some sort, because there's so many ways you can be involved without being directly employed by a particular company that makes this product, right?
Yeah. So, but Nick, and here's the deal, and that's a great way to put it. You don't have to pick up a paycheck from that brand to actually contribute to the success of that model or that movement. And to me, that's one of the coolest things, and that's still true today. Now, it manifests itself very differently than it did back in the day. I'll be honest with you. You're a good dude, but you're also part of that new machine that helps to amplify a position. And it's something, honestly, as an old dude, I'm like, I don't get it, but okay. But you're right. And so, but it ends up being one of those things where being a contributor to the momentum, whether it be an item or an article or a thought process, it can take on a lot of different forms, and all of them are equally important. I have product here in my barn that from over time that I've worked on, from Reebok side, the Hexalite, the DMX, I did all that stuff, and they all present differently. They all have different reasons for being. but they're only just items until the whole team plays their appropriate positions and contributes to it.
Yeah, absolutely. What perfectly said. I and I think too, like there's that's a missing piece, right? The new way of the footwear industry, sneakers specifically, feels very. There's just always a face in front of whatever that story or product is, and I think it's just interesting to see it evolve to that point, and and I think it's an ebb and a flow, right? Like we will probably see that change again. We're already seeing teams of people creating really strong energy and movements and changes amongst very very like focused areas of footwear. And I think the other part of that I think is interesting, and kind of to your early days with this, like the experimentation and the, as you said, the wall of shame behind the wall of fame, right? We're getting to see a lot of really young kids at 15, 16, 17 years old building out their wall of shame right now on an Instagram account. Yeah. And it's turning into things that, to your point about the way that the pump concept went from, kind of heel inside of the foot to the top of the tongue, I feel like we're in this really awesome. It's intimidating to me because I'm not like creative in that way. Like I'm creative in a lot of ways, but that is definitely not my strong suit. But I see some of the kids that are creating customized stuff, and they're taking a shoe off the wall or out of the Goodwill bin and cutting it up and making it their own. And to me, that's like, it's what you did long ago. And now in this new world, it's like now they get to do it and get feedback instantly from that consumer base.
Okay. So I'm going to call you out now. Okay. What was your first pair of Nikes?
My first pair of Nikes.
First pair.
Probably the Cortez, actually.
Well, okay. What was your first pair of Nike Airs that you had for 2 years?
Oh, Nike Airs, the Ultra Force.
Boom.
Yep.
Who spent their time taping that shit together and coloring it and everything else?
Yeah, keeping it together and gluing it and hot glue and yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Because I remember you telling that story. So one of the things that's kind of cool about it, Nick, is that like again, to your point, some people do it in public. Other people who do it behind the scenes. We're all. I think we all have got that. I mean, so don't sell your creativity short, kid.
I appreciate that.
So it's just one of those. It's one of those things. But yeah, I think you're right. And Nick, as a complete selfless plug, this is the one thing I love about this company, GORUCK, that I'm at. Okay, because we do have our founder, Jason McCarthy. He's like. He's the face of the whole thing because you need a person. This company is about team commitment, and we commit to our customers. We commit to each other. We commit to continuing to provide service to the community in the different endeavors we do and stuff. And to your point. I think I think the pendulum's going to swing back in that role in that regard. Pretty significantly, and I think it's super important.
Yeah, most definitely. I agree. The other thing that kind of is probably related to more of what you're doing now that you mentioned about the past, materials, right? I mean, materials back then, I would imagine it was probably a complete pain to source new materials at the time. And now the development process of new materials, the being able to pick and choose, like probably, I don't know if it makes it easier or difficult for someone like you that's putting this stuff together, but talk about that, because I feel like, we went from having leather and rubber to more material choices than people can count on sneakers. And some of those materials do some incredible things and are used outside of sneakers for things that people probably don't even imagine.
Yeah, most certainly. And I think that there is, for me, the polymer companies, the material companies, and the knitting companies. How you make these one-piece knit uppers and things like that. So there's machinery folks, there's raw material folks, and material folks that have been gaining momentum as far as their throughput goes. So I'm going to say over the last probably since about 2010, 2012. There was a period of time in the I'm going to say mid 90s into about the mid 2000s where materials were advancing at a slower pace, right? And so like back in the early days in the 80s and early 90s, there were a lot of new materials. And it was kind of the halcyon days of the sneaker business and all that, right? So there's a lot of new stuff going on. Or more importantly, there was a lot of materials being applied into the sneaker business and athletic footwear business that were being used outside in the automotive, the aerospace area, and things like that. It's been since about, I'm going to say, 2010 or so. Don't quote me as a hard set date, but where the material companies, bioresins, the different polymers, the boosts of the world, the different foams, the eco materials, the different ways to engineer knit, your prime knits, your fly knits, your engineered knit materials. That provides, kind of mechanical structure along with these new materials. So yeah, there's a rainbow of opportunity out there in that. And one of the interesting parts is, and I think the footwear business has been going this way. Every material on a decent shoe these days has to be purposeful. Back in the day, you could put a lot of trinkets on your shoes in order to glamour them up, right? But nowadays it's more elegant, it's more streamlined, and so the materials that are on there, I think in a successful shoe, they have to be purposeful and they have to speak to the personality of the shoe. Like putting a, I don't know, I'm gonna ad lib, putting a boost material on an eco-friendly shoe doesn't make sense. It would be a lightweight, comfortable shoe, but it wouldn't make sense. Whereas, so you know what I mean? So that kind of stuff. So the materials that are chosen and the components that are chosen for any given shoe that's successful, I think, has to support the personality of that shoe.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I don't think people think about how that works very much.
No.
I think we're, and there's various areas of the footwear industry, obviously, but we see a lot of.
But so Nick, here's for me, the fact that people look at a sneaker and they go like, oh yeah, shit, I could have done that. To me, that's the biggest compliment going, because what happened, it's also a pain in the ass, because then you get under assumed and people are like, well, shit, like when you're looking to advocate for yourself and people are like, well, that was easy. It's like, well, no, it wasn't. But if you've done your job well, it looks easy.
Yep.
And so, and if you've done your job really well, it looks like any monkey could do it. And then, and so you're like, okay, I guess I have to be more of a pain in the ass then or something, but whatever. So.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Kind of along the lines of the individual customizers that we're seeing a lot of now. Mm-hmm. How do you, I don't know if it's how do you feel about it, or what do you think about like the kind of, I'm going to be a little negative Nancy here. I'm hoping that it's a trend that kind of goes away, because I'd like to see more innovation in footwear. But we have this kind of hot trend of, oh, here's a classic shoe of some sorts, and now I cut the seams off the tongue, or I, change the logo placement. And I think that's great and creative personally when it's, somebody just tinkering at home and playing around with it, or a customizer that's doing it. But I feel like we're seeing the brands kind of do that. And, I don't know, maybe it's just wishful thinking, because I feel like, to your point about all these different materials and how far we've progressed in the last decade or so, there's a lot of opportunity to go beyond that and to think further outside the box than we ever have before about what footwear could be, even in the environmental aspect of it. To your point about, when people mix a boost and a recycled upper, it's like, well, those two things, it's like me putting a V12 in my Honda. It doesn't make sense.
The interesting part, on an individual level, there are definitely people, or there are people inside of these big brands that are super talented and that tinker, and they put these ideas together, these retro ideas. That's great. I think it's wicked lazy on the big brands part, and I think that it's quite frankly easy for them because the blueprint's already done, and so the risk is very manageable. And the reward is incrementally higher, right? Operating with, so taking a half a step back, everybody wants to be innovative, right? Because that's really cool. Until you realize that innovation by definition is disruption. And the brands don't want disruption. They want incremental revenue to last year, right? If you want to be innovative, you're going to find yourself standing alone in a barn in Massachusetts, okay? It's just the way it is.
Or Sacramento,
Exactly. Same thing, right? You got headphones on in Sacramento. That's how it goes, kid, right? But really, and it's not that that's the price you pay, because that sounds too melodramatic. But, like if you want to be, if you want to be bold, you got to be willing to be bold, which means you may not be popular. So if you're going to do a new article, if you're going to do something new, there's a chance. Well, first of all, it's not going to be endorsed by everybody. So there's going to be a population of people who don't like it to begin with. But there's a chance that it may not rise to that level of notice, either inside of your company or out to the world. And it's like, okay, welcome aboard. Right?
Yep.
And it's, and yet that's kind of the fun of it, isn't it? It's like, when there's a chance that you're going to get scraped up and go down pretty hard, you say like, well, let's give it a try. I mean,
Yep.
So.
Yep. Well, and that kind of leads me into, where I wanted to get with this conversation anyway, right? I find myself kind of, as you called it, kind of a vagabond of sorts. And, it's like on to the next thing and always kind of looking for that thing that's challenging me, mm-hmm. Whether that's just a new environment or a totally new experience, a move or whatever. So how, what's the last few years of your journey look like, and tell us more about where you're at now?
Since my first day back in '85, before you all were born, right? I have been very, very lucky to be a student of this industry. And I mean, the footwear business, I mean, the material business, I mean, the manufacturing business, the science business of things and all that. Literally, I mean, and I say that without trying to, have a red badge of courage. I mean, I really think that I've been fortunate to be a student of this, and to this day I am. I left Reebok in 2015. I started a little consulting business. I was asked by Jason to be on the board here at GORUCK. We were kind of working on this boot called our Mac V1 boot, and then I also took a job with a company called Jabil, Jabil. They're an electronics company out of St. Petersburg, Florida, and they're one of the big contract manufacturers that owns most of the factories that make washing machines and set-top boxes for your cables, TV, all this kind of shit, right? Well, they hired me to be the chief engineer of their innovation in footwear and apparel manufacturing, which is great because I'm not an engineer at all. I mean, and I was with a bunch of smart engineers, but it enabled me to go in and see what they're doing in the world of robotics and manufacturing and things like that. And it was just a great way for me to go back to school, right? And learn stuff. So I did that. And then in the meantime, Jason, we launched this boot, this Mac V1 boot. And Jason said, hey, why don't you stop messing around and I'm saying this for the family audience here. He's like, why don't you stop messing around and why don't you just come down and work with us? And so I said, yeah. And so in 18, I started working at GORUCK as the head of product, which is a self-indulgent title. It really is. We've got about 35 people. We're a small company that's growing. The company has got this, Nick, it's got this palpable energy of just like, it reminds me of the early days of Reebok, where we're like the sky's the limit and everything is possible, literally. And we make great rucksacks, which are backpacks. We have these great events that are team building events. We make some awesome apparel and we make some pretty kick-ass footwear. And so it's one of those things where our footwear, the size of our footwear is about the size of any big brand salesman samples for the year, literally. So we're not a force to be reckoned with from a volume standpoint. We are from an impact standpoint. Our product is not only purposeful and the materials complement the personality of our boot or our ballistic trainer, our cross training shoe. By the way, this one here, dude, this is our new, we call this the Freedom Ballistic Trainer. We're going to do this as a charitable event to generate revenue for the people of Ukraine.
Nice.
Because this is the color of the Ukraine flag.
Yeah.
So Nick, this is coming out in the fall. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
We'll definitely get the details so we can let everybody know when it lands. Too.
Very, very cool. Thanks, Nick. And so this little company called GORUCK, it has actually, honest to God, dude, it has kind of riled me up like the good old days back when we had to make this shoe here, So it's true. It's true, and it's with a group of equally driven but completely different people. We got a bunch for a small group. It's a pretty eclectic blend of people, which is what you want, And so it's not all that you don't need two Paul Litchfields anywhere in the universe, right? And so we got a bunch of different people in this small group, and it's cool. So that's what I've been doing since 18. I continue to work at GORUCK. It's an emerging brand. It's a brand that makes product that is already impactful, even though we're not huge yet. We're not even big yet. So
that's awesome, man. I mean, and I 100% can relate to all of that. The energy, I feel like it's one of those. Can we really do this? Yeah. And you get 4 or 5 people that say, family safe. Yeah. Hell yeah, we can do this. Yeah. And off you're running, Yeah. So
it's like your sneaker history podcast, dude. You guys crank out more content than than large corporations. I don't know how the hell you do it.
Hey, we just keep going. We just make sure that we still like talking to each other, and you know,
that's cool.
Having these conversations gets us motivated because it's like, man, these stories are so good. More people need to hear about them, and that'll get another 50 weeks worth of episodes for us. And, we'll reconnect 2 or 3 years from now and you'll have some new thing to tell me about from GORUCK that we can talk about. So
absolutely. No, for sure, Nick. And dude, I really appreciate the time to talk about this today and the history and all that kind of stuff. But I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that, this is like, it takes a village to raise a shoe, right? and what's funny is that today I get to be the face of the conversation. But honest, dude, I'm just the mouthpiece for a team behind me at GORUCK, a team at our manufacturing place, some raw material suppliers who I've known for 30 plus years who have said, "Hey, look, you guys aren't big enough yet, but because we know you and because we know, because you're a pain in the ass, we'll work with you." Right? So yeah, no. And so it's all those people that actually culminate or work together to culminate into the output. And what happens is you end up getting kind of a single shot. You know what I mean?
Yep. 100%. Well, I appreciate you making the time to talk with me, and, obviously excited for the next things, and definitely keep us in the loop when this shoe comes out so we can tell people about it. And, just appreciate, truly just appreciate you being yourself and kind of just, sharing this journey with people, because I think it's inspiring. I found it inspiring. There's only 4 or 5 people that I count on that list of people that had a story that was connected to the footwear industry that I could actually interpret well enough for my parents to understand.
Yep.
So, that was one of those special things. And you're one of those few people that I've gotten to, it's like, it's always, it feels like I'm meeting the legend for the first time again every time. So I appreciate it.
Dude, Nick, thanks, brother. I really appreciate it. That's super nice to say. And dude, the energy that I convey is based on the energy that I get and the enthusiasm and stuff like that, truthfully. And dude, I met you when you were a punk just coming into this business, right?
Yeah.
No, hold on. You guys told me you used to work in the telephone business, didn't you, or something?
Yeah. I was doing sales for AT&T.
Yeah, that's right too.
The most. Hey, I was just happy to get a check. And then as soon as I realized that I didn't have to wear a shirt and tie and I could go do something else, it was like, well, I'm never going back there. But I say that lovingly because, I've still got to make sure that my AT&T cell phone stays on. But
exactly. No, but dude, because I remember meeting you, much younger. And I don't know, the legacy that you're creating and your content and the way that you invite people in. It's super important and it's super appreciated.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Oh, nice.
Well, let's make sure that people know how to find GORUCK then before we wrap up.
Okay, so we are at www.goruck.com. GORUCK.com. And please check us out and look at some of the videos. Look at the message to the company. Check out our product. We make exceptional product. And if you give it a try, a lot of our product is lifetime guarantees. We fix, we repair things. Our footwear is literally best in class, and I'll take on any of the boys to any of my old friends to have that conversation.
I love to hear it. Well, thanks again for making the time. Thank you everybody for listening. We'll see you on the next episode.
Hey everyone, this is Nick again. Before you take off, do us a solid and head over to Apple Podcasts to leave us a review. Give us a rating on Spotify and Amazon Music, and make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel because we have even more video content coming soon. Speaking of new content, we have an amazing community of sneaker enthusiasts that hang out in our Sneaker History Discord on a daily basis. While sneakers is a connection point that brought us all together, we've all discovered countless shared passions that we have in common with each other. We recently launched a couple of new podcasts directly from our community. One of them is a Formula One podcast. If you're an F1 fan like me, the Exhaust Notes podcast is your weekly fix of Formula One fun. It's hosted by myself, Rohit Malhotra, and Todd Yates. New episodes drop every Tuesday. I've been wearing fitted hats for years and collecting my favorite teams since I was a little leaguer. It has been awesome to see so many new fans getting into fitteds in recent years. Crown and Stitch is our new talk show about fitted hats with Dexter, Keith, and myself, where we talk about fitted hats, snapbacks, throw in some obscure hats because we all kind of like some funky stuff once in a while, don't we? Copping, collecting, and so much more. New episodes drop every Wednesday. Hit the links in the show notes for this episode to give our new shows a listen, and be on the lookout for more new podcasts dropping soon. Last but not least, tell someone you like their kicks today. You never know how far a simple compliment can take you, and we all know how good it feels to have someone show their appreciation. Thank you all for the support, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Peace.